Sorry, folks, to keep people waiting a few minutes. Had a meeting that ran a few minutes late. First of all, welcome everyone. We have this afternoon's Audit Committee ahead of us, and for item number 1, we have our auditor here, Matt Beddick. So Matt, welcome. Oh. Matt's retiring? I don't think he's retiring yet. Someone just asked if you're retiring. I said, you're not, I don't think, you got a little way to go till you can retire, I think.
Yeah, thanks, I think. Usually I'm like making the short jokes, not the retirement jokes. Anyways, we have our presentation here. I'll walk through the pieces, recognizing that the general audit plan is generally consistent with what we've seen in the past. And so, I'll not dwell on points that perhaps I've already made before, but perhaps impress upon things that are more interesting or new or important that we think this committee understands. I'll flip us onto page 3, which is our executive summary, and we do touch on many of the things beyond. And this is 1-8 in your agenda materials. But specific to say, we are required to confirm our independence with this committee each year, and as the external financial statement auditor, we have to be independent of the city, and that means that obviously we don't have any financial interests in the city. As well, we have not taken any non-audit services that would put us in a position of management or auditing our own work. So needed to do that. On the next page, we discuss materiality as it relates to the financial statement audit. And we touch on this each year, but I think it's important to review it again. So materiality at its core is the amount of uncorrected errors, either individually or in aggregate, that could exist in the financial statements, and for us to still issue a clean audit opinion on those financial statements. It is also the numerical start to how we scope our work and the tolerance levels that we accept. And so we've set materiality at approximately $6 million, which is about 1.5% of the estimated revenues for the year at just under $400 million. We have provided a reference point from last year, and the materiality last year was approximately $4 million. And so the initial question is begged is, why did it change from $4 million to $6 million? And that is because primarily we had set the materiality levels relatively low for the City of Kitchener relative to not only the audits of municipalities that we do out of our office here in Waterloo Region, but throughout the province. So the average benchmark was about 1.5% to even 2.5%. So we increased it to approximately the 1.5% mark. That does mean that in some cases our extent of testing is slightly less, but we don't believe that will have a significant impact. Furthermore, as we've said before, we will accumulate differences at a much lower level than that, and so that amount has been set at 5% of materiality at $300,000. So again, to the extent we find differences that are uncorrected or corrected that are in excess of the $300,000, we will accumulate them and report them. In helping to understand what materiality means for us relative to you, it's important to note that we don't just look at things that are greater than $6 million in value. In fact, much of the testing we do is at right down to the invoice level. So we could be testing items at the $100 level, or the $1,000 level, or the $10,000 level. It depends. Obviously, the lower dollar value that we're testing, the more of those items we'd have to select. Our approach is risk-based, so we do look at higher dollar values, but certainly much less than the $6 million figure. As well, we note that what materiality means in evaluating differences in the statements, we would put this to you in that if your revenues were higher or lower by $6 million, so here we've used a reference point of $387 million. if revenues reported were actually $385 million or $381 million, would somebody looking at your financial statements outside of the city come to a different conclusion as to the size and scope of your operations? And when you think about it from that perspective, it's a little bit easier to get your head around. I'll move on to the next slide, where we provide a summary of the various types of audit reports and deliverables that we do in addition to the audit of the consolidated financial statements of the city. Those are listed out here, and there's no change in the current period. We also note that we are the auditors for Kitchener Power Corporation, which includes Kitchener Wilmot Hydro, Inc. It's also important to note that when we perform these other audits, so for the KPL and Center in the Square, we're using a much lower materiality level with respect to those audits because we are issuing standalone opinions with respect to those financial statements. On the next page, which is 1-11 in your materials, we are required to discuss the risk of fraud as it relates to an audit of financial statements. And let me be very clear, from the scope of this risk, it's risk that the financial statements may be materially and intentionally misstated. We're not talking about the various ways that the city may be subjected to fraud or theft from outside sources. And so in looking at the fraud risk in the audit, we are required to consider two areas: the risk of revenue recognition fraud and the risk of override of internal controls. Revenue recognition fraud generally means how management may use accounting policies to over or understate revenue intentionally. This is a typical risk in a for-profit or a commercial enterprise where they have inventory or other things that they could manipulate the sales from. And so based on our understanding of the city and our approach for other municipal audits, we don't believe that's a significant risk and have therefore dismissed it. What we cannot dismiss is the risk from override of internal controls. And so what this means is that regardless of the internal control structure that exists on a day-to-day basis within the operations of the finance group, there is a risk that management may intentionally override those controls or go around them. And we have a variety of processes to assess the risk as well as test for those. In our preliminary risk assessment for fraud risk for the city, we have assessed it at its lowest possible level. On the next page, we do identify a variety of areas that undertake a significant amount of audit effort, either due to the size of the balances, the complexity of the transactions, or their otherwise interest from an internal or external perspective. I want to note that some of these items don't necessarily exactly line up with the budget cycle and things that you may be dealing with from a budget perspective. The first example I might say is on the second row, where we identify obligatory reserve fund revenue and deferred revenue. And so this is primarily development charges, and the sort of the budget way of accounting for and managing development charges within the day-to-day operations can be quite a bit different from how they're reflected in your audited financial statements. And the key item there is, while you may collect development charges in advance, you can only show those charges as revenue once the money is spent on the related development projects. And so we have some tests that address that. We also note that tangible capital assets, that's the accounting for the assets that reside on the financial statements, and can and will be different from capital fund, both the revenues and expenditures from a capital perspective. Lastly, we do highlight our work around the gaswork operation, and we spend a significant amount testing the revenues and costs of gas supply delivery. On the next page, we do identify some of the other areas, but these are the more routine revenue and expense transactions, and we apply a variety of tests to those. Some examples that we may perform, say for example for taxation revenue, what we'll normally do there is we'll obtain the impact data directly from the Municipal Assessment Corporation, and then we'll apply that data to the tax rates that have been passed in the bylaw, and we compare that to the amounts that are actually recorded in the financial statements. For user fees, for example, for water and sewer utilities, we will actually obtain from the Region of Waterloo the purchase data with respect to the amount of water, and then we'll apply that against the rates that have been set, adjusting obviously for a loss factor, and compare those amounts to what's been recorded in the financial statements. And we look for outliers, or we look to make sure the amounts are within a tolerable level. When it comes to payroll expenses, we'll compare timesheets to approvals, to approved wages, and items like that. On the next page, we deal with the audit cycle and timetable. Recognizing that we're here today, we have a team in next week performing interim audit field work, and then we're back out towards the end of March and through the bulk of April to complete our year-end field work. What we thought it was important to note was that the total time spent with respect to the audits here at City Hall and related enterprises, including Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro, we are in excess of approximately 1,100 hours, or approximately 30 full-time equivalent weeks of our team performing the audits both here and the other sites. So when we're out doing the year-end field work, we typically are here for about 3.5 to 4 weeks, and that ranges in staff people from 1 the first week to 4 staff persons during the rest of the week. So it just gives you sort of a sense of the size and scope of the audit activity. I won't run through the appendices that are included in the next number of pages, with the exception of one, which is Appendix 4, and something that we've discussed with the finance team here. It's referred to as lean and audit, and what we're just communicating here is that we are applying lean principles to one of our requirements under the audit standards, and that is documenting and understanding your processes and controls. And so typically this has been done on more of a narrative basis. We will discuss with your team sort of, okay, what happens next, what happens next, what happens next. And instead of that sort of narrative paragraph basis, we're going to take a lean principled approach where we're going to be doing process mapping with the objective of improving our understanding, improving the documentation, but at the same time, if we can identify areas for improvement, we're going to share those as well and provide additional value to the city. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll sort of conclude the formal part of the presentation, but be happy, as always, to take any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Matt. Great presentation. Any questions of Matt?
When's my birthday?
Council are pushing their button and it's not coming on for me. No. It works for you, but it's not coming up for me in the queue. Switch to council now. Can you click in again? No. Click in again, folks? No. Try it again. Well, we may have to do this the old-fashioned way. Yvonne, go ahead. Try.
Can you do speaker or just speak loud? Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. That's fine.
Can you just click out and in? I just want to
sure.
see. Click in. It's still not showing up for me, though, on the list. Let's continue this and we'll solve it between this and council this evening. Okay, or is there a way you can, I know you can turn them all on, no, there's a way to turn them all on because the students always figure this out
Oh, yeah,
when they're here. Okay, can you, John, can you just, I see yours is on?
Signatures on.
Okay, Kelly, try yours. It's not coming on. Okay, go ahead, Yvonne, and we'll have to,
All right. So this lean audit, this is a new technique that you've started with the city, or you're starting with the city?
Starting to be done.
Starting?
Yes.
Okay, so, and that will take effect in the next cycle of audits?
That's correct.
Okay, because I was going to ask you if you'd found any, like, control gaps, but you haven't, because you haven't started the...
Haven't started it yet.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Kelly, I think you didn't have your hands up. Any other? John? Councillor Gazzola?
Are we working here? Can we go back to the materiality sheet, if we could just... the first thing, how do you come up with that 387 million? I tried to see what that included. Does that include all the enterprises, or is that just a tax burden?
That would be all of the enterprises.
Including our gas works?
That's correct.
Yeah. Going back, I was surprised to see the materiality go up by 50%, and you explained it by saying we've had low materiality in the past or something. So what has changed? Why don't we carry on with low materiality? What's happened there?
So our objective was to be consistent with our audits of other municipalities in the province.
So in other words, you've had lower materiality for us compared to your other municipal audits?
That's correct.
So you've been overcharging us in the past?
It's
You
not
don't
about
have
the
to
fee.
answer that one. If I can just go over to the audit approach, I'm just concerned and just want to double check on, like the first one is the post-employment benefits. We had been running into a problem with our actuarial requirements. Has that, in your opinion, been cleared up, or do we still have concerns there?
While we haven't performed the work yet, we understand that the gap that existed between what the actuaries were calculating and what WSIB was providing has been significantly narrowed. But like I said, we haven't done the work yet.
But you will, and you will keep a close eye on that.
That's correct.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, that's the main thing. Yeah. The other question I had on that page about what do you do with the verification of gas supply? Like gas supply isn't something that we make any profit on. It's something that just passes through. So what all do you get involved with in that area?
I believe our use of the word supply is not intended to mean the supply or the supply division of the gasworks. It's more on a consolidated basis.
Okay, so it's not that. Okay, that's fine.
Apologize for the confusion.
Yeah, okay, that's because we do have sort of four divisions. One's delivery, supply. So, but you're talking about the total picture.
Correct.
Yeah. Just one final question, and I had down. I wondered how many hours the audit had taken in the past, and you answered that, 1,100 hours. Do you see this because of changing in materiality? Do you see it decreasing this year? Or?
It could decrease slightly. We expect to spend more time with the lean mapping, and then there's the annual variance of 10% up or down in any one given year based on a variety of factors.
Okay, so there's no material.
Not a material change.
I was looking for a big credit coming, but that's not coming, I gather. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, John. Any other? Sorry, who else had? Councillor Marsh, you had questions?
No, I was just hoping to...
Okay. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you.
So since we are taping this meeting, it would actually be helpful to get the system up and running. I'm told a reset will do it, so we'll take a 5-minute recess and we'll start up again in 5 minutes. Oh, okay, sorry, thank you. Moved by Councillor Ioannidis, Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Now we'll take a recess. Thank you.
I said Brenda maybe come. I stopped bringing Tom. He's retiring.
Okay. So the gremlins seem to be more gremlin-y than normal today, and our reset hasn't worked, so we will operate in the traditional manner, and hopefully it can get fixed between now and council. So we'll go the old-fashioned way and ask people to raise their hands. Well, staff will work from the middle section to turn them on. So I'm wondering if any of this has to do with the power outage on Saturday potentially, and yeah, so maybe something needs a reboot. So do you actually get the queue list, or oh, so they queue into you, then you can call them out? Oh, perfect. Okay, I'll just sit back and relax today.
You have the power tonight.
So with that, I will invite Ms. Tasker to the podium, and we'll start with item number 2.
All right, good afternoon,
So still
everyone.
queue in, everybody, if you want to.
All right, so the first item that I'll talk about today is the 2018 internal audit work plan and the service review work plan. So just a reminder that any of the work that I do, as well as any of the service improvement staff, is really, the purpose of it is to protect our city's assets and interests. And there's 3 types of work that we do within any of the reviews that we conduct, and that is to ensure that our operations are efficient and effective, that we have proper controls in place to protect our assets from theft or fraud, and ensuring that employees are in compliance with all of our policies, procedures, and legislation. Now, as you recall in the past, we have a plan, a process to put our work plan together each year, and that consists of primarily the list of prioritized services, which has been created in the past. Last year it was updated, and this prioritized list is based on inherent risk, expense budget, and the date of last review. So from that list, we pick the next services off the list to create the work plan. We also consider council priorities as well as any corporate priorities. From this, we're able to have a consistent program of work that allows us to cover all services roughly within a 6-year period. And just a reminder that from this list, we do create both the internal audit work plan as well as an integrated service review work plan that others have responsibility for. So Audit Committee is only required to approve the internal audit portion of it, but I will provide the rest of the work plan as well for your information. Now this year we do have a slightly different process from that, and I want to explain a little bit about that. So first of all, we have 7 reviews that are being carried over from the 2017 work plan into 2018. And those 7 reviews, the first one is winter maintenance. This was actually planned to carry over into 2018. It was planned to go until June of next year, so that one is on track and proceeding as expected. Fire admin, this was a capacity and lean process review. This one started a little bit later than expected, and it will flow into January and should be wrapped up by then. Similarly, the bylaw property standards lean process review also started late and will flow into January. The Kitchener Utilities risk assessment, this is not started yet, and it will span the first quarter of 2018. This was one that was requested by Council last year. Similarly, the value for money audit of consultant use was also requested by Council, and it has not started, but it is slated to span into the second quarter of 2018. We also had a benefits and pensions admin review, and this started earlier this year, but it was put on hold for the corporate organizational review, and it will start back up again in the first quarter of 2018. And then finally, we had the SAP separation of duties audit. This was a controls review, and this has already been started, and it will wrap up early in the new year. So with the exception of the winter review, all of the other work is being carried over as a result of 2 factors. First, 2 of our service review staff were assigned to other special projects, which reduced our capacity and our ability to complete the work plan on time. So 1 resource was assigned to work on the corporate organizational design review, and 1 resource was assigned to work on the water infrastructure project. The second factor was that when the revenue comprehensive review was originally put on the 2016 and 2017 work plan, a lean review of the processes was not in scope at that time. So it was subsequently chosen as our lean pilot project, and this meant extra time was taken to select and onboard a consultant, and then the entire review timeline was extended. So this resulted in pushing the start date for some of these other reviews later in the year. In addition to the 2017 work that will flow into 2018 in the first half, there may be other divisional or sectional level organizational reviews that come out of the corporate org review that's happening right now. At this time, we don't know what that work will look like, so we haven't put anything specifically in the work plan for it. However, we have reserved some capacity should this work be required. If it's not required, then I can use up the time to put in some other standard controls and compliance type reviews, such as employee expenses, the Visa cards, or the petty cash reviews. Now, as you're aware, there is a corporate commitment in 2018 to conduct a full review of our development process and services. The process review portion of this review will begin in the second half of 2018 and will be very complex. All of the service review staff will be assigned to this project, including myself, and therefore we will not have capacity for additional work at that time. So that being said, you'll notice that the work plan that we have put forward does not currently include any of the items that were requested by Council in the September Audit Committee meeting. However, we do feel that we can address these topics in other ways. So I'm just going to explain a little bit about those, and then at the end, when we go into discussion mode, if you still have a concern that these topics are not being addressed to your satisfaction, then we can discuss other ways of resourcing this. So the first topic, the new Executive Director of Economic Development has been and will continue to assess the workload and resourcing as he settles into his new role. So therefore, we don't feel that an audit of workload and capacity for the division as a whole, or specifically for special events, is needed right now. We'd like to give Mr. Bloom a chance to assess the situation on his own first before determining if further review by internal audit is required. Next is the facility planning. Now, we understood that your request for us to review this topic was related to the condition assessment for buildings as an input into the business planning process for next year. As this is a specialized field, the audit work is not something that can be done in-house. However, facilities management is already in the process of conducting facility assessments of our top 3 building assets, and then further work will be done through the Leisure Facilities Master Plan related to facility renewal requirements. So if this is not exactly what you were looking for on this topic, in terms of an audit, then we can discuss this at the end. Regarding the INS administration, again, we weren't exactly sure what you were looking for on this item, but there are 2 facets that we see related to INS admin. The first topic is the interim INS leadership team, and this will actually be resolved through the corporate organizational review early in the new year. So there will be no need for an audit in this area. And then secondly, the administrative support services, which actually don't report in through this section, but that may have been cause for your comments, they are actually currently being reviewed by asset management, and they're looking to assess the effectiveness of the support services to make sure that they meet the needs of the business related to data management, analysis, and support. So again, a separate review is not needed at this time. And finally, you asked for a review of parking technology just to ensure that we're maximizing the use of technology and revenue generation. The parking enterprise has actually been exploring several technology improvements which are listed in your report. So we don't feel a further review is required at this point until perhaps after the technology is deployed. So just to sum up, we do appreciate your input, and normally we would have incorporated it into the work plan, but this year is really a bit of an anomaly, and that we have very little capacity to add new work. However, if you feel that any of the items that you have requested truly are not being addressed in the manner that you wished, then we can bring it up at the end of my presentation. Which moves us into the actual work plan. So the next 2 slides are my internal audit work plan, and this is what you'll be approving. In the first section with service reviews, the first 3, as I mentioned, are ones that are carrying over from last year. So you've already approved these. That's the winter maintenance review, the fire admin, and the bylaw enforcement reviews. The new one on here is that comprehensive review of development. In the area of controls audits, we have the SAP user profiles, which again is being carried over from last year. We've got some empty rows in there just simply for if we do have capacity, I can add in some of those reviews that I mentioned, such as Visa cards or petty cash or employee expenses. And then recurring internal audit activity, I will continue to do the physical inventory audit in the fall, and any confidential investigations that come up as required. Now, in addition to the internal audit work plan, the other service improvement staff are also working on the 3 reviews that are carrying over from this year, being the benefits and pensions admin, Kitchener Utilities risk assessment, and the value for money of consultants. And the only new one that they have added onto theirs is a capacity and lean process review of volunteer resources. So that concludes this piece of the presentation. So we'll open up for discussion and then approval of the work plan.
Okay, we'll open the floor to questions. Madam Clerk.
Yeah, a number of the questions I had have been answered. I'm finding myself a little confused, but a couple of the programs you got involved with, you mentioned was the water infrastructure. What is that? Is that new WIP program that you're talking about?
Yes.
And your staff got involved with that?
There was one of our business analysts was pulled off on that project.
There's this new buzzword, lean. I've heard, before today I hadn't heard it, other than I keep trying to lose weight. But what is this all about, lean? I don't.
Sure.
I see it used here all over the place.
Lean is a methodology that's really focused on adding value for our customers and reducing waste in our processes. So there's a whole philosophy behind it, a number of techniques and tools, but it involves mapping out our processes, looking at it with a view of removing areas that do not add value to the customer.
Is this new?
No, it's been around from probably the 1930s. It was developed in manufacturing, and it has since been adapted for service and government. It's very big in healthcare right now, and it is actually being spread into municipalities quite a bit now.
Can you give me a specific example of what we're dealing with? Is there a lot of fat around, or what?
There's always opportunities for improvement. It's just looking at it through a different lens. So our lean pilot project was within the revenue division, and we mapped out all of their processes from the start of setting up a customer all the way through to depositing the funds in the bank. And we looked at it. There's a number of questions that we can ask throughout that process mapping to determine where are the steps that are not adding value to the customer. What are things that they really don't care that we're doing? Do we need to do them? Are they legislated? And if not, can we get rid of them? And what are the things that are slowing up the process? So we had a number of recommendations that came through that audit report that has been previously presented that allowed us to reduce cycle time, reduce waste, and improve value for the customer.
So how many FTEs did that free up?
About 1.5 FTEs. Now, it didn't free them up in that we did not lay anyone off. There was work that was not being done that could now be accommodated with this additional capacity. And that's really the goal of it in our setting. We're not trying to lay off staff. We have more work than we can handle right now. Our city is growing, our population is growing, but our staff is not. So by doing these lean reviews, it allows us to free up capacity to get to that additional work.
What would have happened if you hadn't freed these FTEs up? What wasn't being done that should be done in that example?
Certainly the call times, the wait times that customers have on the phone, for example, when they're calling in to revenue to find out about their bill, they have very long wait times, and customers get frustrated when they have to wait so long. So when we looked at this review, we looked at what are the top 3 types of calls that are causing us to be on the phone for a long period of time, and can we improve the process so that we can answer those calls in a quicker manner. So we were able to do that. And hopefully, as we see the results coming out over the next 6 months to a year, we can hopefully see a decreased amount of wait times on the phone.
Okay, at one point you talked about the 3 largest buildings. What are the 3 largest buildings?
I'm going to have to defer to someone else on that. Does anyone over here know?
Through the mayor, so the 3 largest buildings that we own are City Hall, the KOF, and the Aud. There's also the community centers that we're looking at for the 3 largest community centers that are input producers. So I don't have the list with me specifically, but I know the Bright Up Community Center is one of the ones that is one of the largest emitters.
Okay, I thought it would be the City Hall, KOF, and the auditorium. That's fine. Just one final. What is INS? INS?
Infrastructure Services Department.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Nothing to do with inoculation.
Any other questions?
Thank you. So as I was looking through your report, Ms. Tasker, one of the questions I had was when you look to see if staff achieves goals. So on 2.2, you have 3 different goals, I think, and then they're divided into 3 bullet points. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions are staff following the rules to ensure work is accurate, reliable, timely, efficient, effective, safe, and legal? Do we ever look at, or should maybe we incorporate in flexibility? So the reason I'm asking that is I'm thinking sometimes when we have requests for information or concerns by citizens, or even when we get phone calls, I wonder if we ever sort of triage, these are issues that we can answer really quickly, these are issues that require maybe a little bit more staff time, and these require a substantial amount of staff time. Do we ever do anything like that?
So when we would do a lean process review, certainly when we did the revenue review, that was what we looked at, was how we are answering the questions and what processes can we put in place to have that triage and have some easy answers in front of us that we can answer the questions more quickly. So yes, that will be something that gets factored in and looked at when we do these types of reviews.
Okay, and so would that fall under sort of the flexibility of staff being able to sort of move quickly through a certain process and respond?
Yeah, so it's more under the efficiency than under compliance.
Okay. When you talk about, it says these may include service delivery, lean tools, time studies, value for money analysis. That may be a very difficult challenge to how do you put a dollar value on some of the services, right? How do we include that in our audits?
So in the past, the value for money audits that I've done have been specific to divisions to say, do we need to have this in-house or would it be cheaper for us to outsource it? So it's a matter of calculating what are the fully burdened costs of an employee, so including not only their salary and their benefits, but their overhead costs as well, compared to if we had to purchase the same service externally. And so going to a number of suppliers and asking them what their price would be and then making that comparison. Mm-hmm. And then it's not only just cost, there's also other value in different benefits that you get from either staff or from external providers.
Yeah. And that was I was one of the people who had asked about the consultant review. And so now I understand that that's something we have to put off due to the other work that's happening. Do we have an understanding of when we might be able to tackle that? Is it?
So it's in January. It will start. Yes.
Of 2018 still?
Yeah. Okay. So everything's just flowing over into the next year. So it's part of the work plan. It's just we haven't been able to start it yet.
Okay. Is there ever any checks and balances around internal audits? Like, where's the checks and balances? I know. Our KPMG representative said that there were checks and balances, so it made me think about what kind of checks and balances do we use for our internal audits?
In terms of auditing me?
Well, when you or your staff do audits on a particular department, is there a peer review sometimes, or how does that work? If it's only you doing it, that's
all of
challenging.
My reports do get approved by the deputy CAO, so that's my check and balance.
Okay. I was just thinking that's pretty onerous if it's falling all on your shoulders. Just a comment around the parking enterprise, if I may. The third point, the new nighttime user rate, they're talking about 2019. What a fantastic idea, whoever came up with this. We've got parking garages that sit, virtually empty once everybody goes home. Is this something that can be moved up? And maybe that's just a question I'll throw at Mr. Reedman, and he can respond offline if he wants to council. I think I had one more question, Ms. Tasker, but I can't find it. I'll cue in again if somebody... Did you want to respond? Okay.
Through the mayor, so there is some technology changes that we have to look at over the next little while, and then it would likely come as part of the budget process for rates for next year, like the 2019 budget. So I don't think we'll be able to move it up in time, but it is something we are looking at for rolling out for 2019.
Okay, all right. The other question so this is, sorry, under approval, you had talked about, and this is 2.2-14, under the SAP user profiles, you said if you have time, you may add in other items like visa, employee expenses, etc. When would you know if you had the time to add that in?
Once the corporate organizational review is complete and shared with everyone early in the new year, then we'll know if there is requirement for us to do any deeper dives into any of the divisions or sections.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Councillor Marsh?
Through the mayor, just wanted to, my question was mostly answered about the parking enterprise, technology utilization, and revenue maximization, but I just want to know, will council be receiving in that report, or can we request that we learn some of the technologies that have been considered by staff, even if they're not ultimately the ones that are being recommended?
Mr. Reedman?
Through the mayor, so the three technologies we're considering are outlined in the report. So it's the pay-by-phone option. We're exploring the real-time usage things through the Innovation Lab is one of the ideas we're putting forward. And we're looking at using our existing technology for the overnight parking rate as part of the a way to factor that in so that we can ensure that people leave during the day so that we free up the space.
Yeah, okay. And those are the three main ones that we'll be focused on for next year? That's correct. Okay, thank you. And I just want to, may I make a comment? I just want to make a quick comment that Ms. Tasker, as usual, this is a really thorough report, and we appreciate your diligent work in being our only internal auditor, and I for one, have full confidence in how you're doing. Thank you.
Great. Who's next? Councillor Netsky?
Yeah, Councillor Gazzola asked a question regarding the top three building assets, and the answer I heard was City Hall, the auditorium, and?
The COF.
The COF. Oh, okay. What about Center in the Square? When I thought the three, those are my three, and or maybe is there four, really, if we throw the Center Square in? I don't know.
It might be the fourth, but I don't think it's in the top three. Mr. Reedman?
Through the mayor, it is one of our largest facilities, but detailed asset management plans have been done for that building, so I've left that off the list of the ones we're focusing on right now.
Any additional questions?
I'd just like to move the motion at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? If not, the motion's been moved. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Can you just try switching the queue list type to manual? Oh, that won't work either? Okay. Yeah, because I tried it from my end. I thought that might have been our problem. Okay, and then we have our status report, item number 3, and we'll go back to Ms. Tasker.
All right. So I'll be sharing with you today just one audit, and that is the annual physical inventory count. Also in progress, as I've already mentioned, are the 4 reviews that you see on your screen. So I'd like to take a moment to thank accounting for lending me one of their staff, as usual, to help me with the count, and that was Mark Mandrushu. He was able to come out on the weekend and help me do all the counting, so I appreciate that. Just to refresh your memories, the purpose of doing the physical inventory count is for me to go in and verify the amount that the staff are counting. So they go in and they will count every single part that we own and adjust SAP accordingly. We then go in as an audit team and choose a sample of parts to verify that their count is correct. So we do two different types of standard counts. The first is a sheet to floor, where we're taking specific part numbers out of the system and then going to and counting them. So we took the top 30 total values and the top 30 unit values. We then do a second type, which is a floor to sheet audit, where we just randomly go through the warehouse and pick something and count it and then compare it back to what is in the system. So that sample of 90 different parts equates to 19% of our total inventory value that we have verified. So the results of that count was that of those 90 parts that we sampled, 10 of them were a different value than what staff had counted. So we went back and triple checked them, and this resulted in an additional write-down of $11.7 thousand. The magnitude of this adjustment is normal. It's what we normally encounter. Sometimes it's a write-up, sometimes it's a write-down. This year, the root cause of these adjustments was related to some units of measure, which I will get to at the end of my presentation. Another piece of analysis that we do at this time is to take a look at the total adjustments that have been made throughout the year. So these include not only adjustments that were made during the physical inventory, but throughout the year as they're doing some rotating stock counts throughout the stock room. So this year, our year-to-date, as of November 29th, when I ran the report, we had $297,000 of write-offs, which compared to last year, for a full year of $219,000, seemed a little high to me. Another metric that we look at is the write-downs as a percentage of our total purchases for the year. The benchmark in industry is anything less than 2.5% is normal and expected. This equated to, our $297,000 equated to 3.2%. So this raised a red flag for me to say this isn't normal. And once I dug into the details a little bit, we found two anomalies that were a result of a miscommunication between a vendor and staff. They had sent some aggregate type material that was supposed to go directly to a job site. It was not supposed to be part of inventory. They had mislabeled it on the invoice. So staff had receipted it into inventory, only to discover that it wasn't inventory and they needed to adjust it out. So it shows as a write-off, but it was really just a mistake. So if you adjust for those two anomalies, the total amount of write-offs is closer to what we saw last year, $219,000, which is 2.3% and within the benchmark. So I don't have any concerns with the process from that perspective. Now, when we look at the total write-downs, we divide the stock into two categories, controllable and uncontrollable. So the controllable stock is everything that's actually in the COF, in the stock room, and the store staff have the complete control over ordering it and issuing it out to staff. Within that controllable stock, we had a $12.6 thousand write-down, which is, again, normal. It's a very small amount. On the uncontrollable stock side, the amount is higher. It's $284,000, which again is normal for our process. Uncontrollable stock is everything that's outside in the yard. So we've got piles of aggregate, we've got salt, we've got pipe and manhole covers and a number of other equipment and pieces of inventory that staff have the ability to go and take for their jobs, but they don't always tell stores that they've taken it, which is why we need to do an adjustment at the end of the year. I've broken it down there on the screen by inventory category. So the largest one is under road maintenance supplies for $174,000. The bulk of that is road salt. So we don't have any process at the current time to relieve inventory when it's taken from the salt dome. The other large categories are the manhole covers and the road building materials, which is all the aggregates. So from this point of view, again, the total amount is within our threshold, the process is in control, and the adjustments are considered to be very small. Now we move on to the planned improvements. So I talked a little bit about the audit adjustments were as a result of unit of measure issues. So what this means is the majority of the parts in our warehouse are all individual units. So if you see 10 on the shelf, there's a quantity of 10 in the system. There are the occasional types of inventory, however, that have a different unit of measure. So they might be a case, or they might be in pounds, or they might be in meters squared. And this created a bit of a problem this year in that some of the staff had created or had counted, for example, 10, put 10 in the system, but it should have been one case instead. So we had to do an adjustment after the fact when we did our audit to put it back into cases. So in terms of improvement for next year, what the store staff are going to do is go through and clearly identify and flag any of the parts that are not an individual unit measure, so that when they go to do the physical inventory, they'll make sure that they're using the right unit of measure when they count them. The second improvement areas has been carried over from last year, and that was to implement utilization of the weigh scale so that we can get some of this controllable inventory being relieved properly. They had held off on that project for the outcome of the aggregates review, which I had brought forward to you earlier this year. So now they're in the process of going forward with that to improve the process. They're integrating the weigh scale with SAP so that the inventory relief will be automatic. And they're working on improved yard layout as well. So hopefully this time next year we'll start to see some improvement in that non-controllable inventory, particularly in the aggregates and the salt area next year. Are there any questions on the physical inventory?
Any questions?
Yes, thank you.
Hold on, who was first? Councillor Fernandez or Yanetsky?
Me.
Fernandez? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. So with this anomaly, that's about an $80,000 anomaly. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. That seems like an awful lot that seems like a really big mistake. I mean, you know, maybe in the whole scheme of all of our inventory, it's not. But what has put in process so that that kind of situation doesn't happen again?
Well, we've informed the vendor that they make sure they put the right description on next time.
I see, okay. There still seems to be some shrinkage, and I wondered about, so help me understand if I'm reading this correctly. The seed, sod, and fertilizer was a write up in 2016, and now it's a write down in 2017?
What page are you on?
Sorry, I apologize. 3-3. So negative numbers are a write up, and then positive numbers are a write down.
Yes.
Okay, so you actually had more of the product than you had expected to have?
Sorry, this year it was a write down, so we had less than was in the system.
Okay, so that's where I have concerns when I look at that. I mean, I don't imagine manholes and catch basins are walking out the door, but seed, fertilizer, that kind of stuff is easily removed from the site if there's no controls.
Yeah, so this will be part of the, when they're looking at aggregates as well. I mean, it's not an aggregate per se, but it's the same uncontrollable type of inventory, so they were working on the controls on that.
Okay, so and in the sign shop, what kind of raw materials would we be talking about?
Paint and the metal that the sign is created with, the sign posts as well.
Okay, all right. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we did have an issue with this a few years back as well, didn't we? When we did an audit on aggregates, and was that when it was still at the Battler Yard, or was that when it was moved from the Battler to the Cough?
It's been an ongoing problem in both locations.
Okay. And so you're hoping that the recommendation and the utilization of the weigh scales would alleviate this?
Yes. Once they have a process in place, the intent is for staff, when they are receiving any of those aggregates from the piles, that they're going over the weigh scale to say how much they're taking, and then it's integrated into SAP, so it will automatically relieve the inventory.
So how is it that they can't go over, that they avoid going over the scale, though? Isn't that a direct out and in? Like, if a person is driving a truck in that's empty and they're filling it up and then they're driving it out, they can actually go around the scale?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think the layout of the yard will, some of that will be fixed. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like, but I think the intent was to make it so that they needed to go over the scale to get out.
Okay, yeah, I would like to see that go down a little bit, because although it's, it's materialistic to what our overall inventories are, but it just sort of signals that there seems to be a continuous issue with some of those uncontrollable inventory, right? Is that the right word?
Yeah, and I wouldn't suggest that anyone is stealing this material. I don't think that there's any fraud involved. I think it's more just if we could tighten up the process, and so that we can relieve inventory, we can have a better handle on how much we are using and have it properly allocated to different projects and things like that as well.
And that's what I was thinking too, in terms of if we are setting a budget for how much that particular division needs in aggregates or seed and sod or our sign shop needs in material, if you're setting a budget for how much they expect to be using based on the amount that they thought they had, right? Yeah. I mean, that would definitely affect the budgets of each of those divisions. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, were both the anomalies the same situation? Was that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's really not that's just a counting error, right? That had nothing to do with the shortage, really.
Right.
Yeah,
it got receipted in an error, and then we adjusted it out, so it shows as a write-off, but really it's an in and out.
It is a write-off, right? No, the inventory is $2 million or so. That's the year-end inventory?
Yes, that's the total balance at the time that we did the inventory.
Do you do any further counts this year, or is it?
I don't, but they have been doing some rotating counts on parts throughout the year.
Yeah. What of that? How much of that is controllable of the $2 million?
I'd have to go back and check. I don't know offhand.
But a substantial portion of it is uncontrollable, I would think.
Yes, because a large dollar value is the salt and the aggregates. Okay.
One of my questions dealt with weigh scales. Where are the weigh scales? Where are they at Battler? Is that where they are?
They're at the COF.
Or at the COF?
I don't know exactly where they are at the COF. They're in the back somewhere.
Where's all our inventory?
At the COF.
At the COF. There's nothing at Battler anymore. No. So all the aggregates are at the COF.
Yes.
Salt too, all right?
Yes, in the dome.
And so, if they're weighing, there should be very little discrepancy in the future. But you say they can actually come in and go out without weighing in and out?
Currently, yes.
Okay, and you're looking at that, so that's important. Now, my concern was when we receive a shipment of salt, how do we know we're getting what we're supposed to get?
I believe those are weighed when they come in.
So they are weighed in.
I believe so. At least I know that we have done spot checks before. I don't know if every single load is, but we have confirmed that the loads are correct.
Well, they should almost all be checked in, I would think. That's a substantial every time you get a load. My whole concern here is that the figures are not big, and for the size of an inventory, it's not that important in our city. I was surprised at how we would be short on manholes. How can those be unaccounted for? I can understand it on aggregates. You sort of guess at what you're taking or something, but manholes, they're pretty countable.
It's because they're located outside in the yard, so staff will take them for their job to go and install them, and they don't let stores know that they've taken them.
And they can get out of the yards without letting anybody know?
Yes. We don't have enough staff in stores to have someone out there monitoring the yard.
Okay, and generally speaking, even if that happens, it's going to should get charged to a job, and it doesn't. So we're not really losing any. My only concern would be when we're doing something that's billable, if we're doing work for the region or for somebody else, that we're not getting all the charges going in. Therefore, there we are really losing. If it's for stuff for ourselves, it's just an accounting thing. Is it here? Is it there? So, do we know? Is there are there a lot of aggregates and whatnot, or even materials that could be involved for billable customers?
I can't speak to the billable to other customers, but I do know that the material that is typically used by a certain division is charged back to them even when we write it off. So if it's going back to operations, for example, for salt, we know that it's them that's using it, so we're charging it back to them. It may not be on a specific work order, but it's
well, that isn't a problem, because if they've used it, it's when somebody else should be footing the bill that we're losing out on. Okay, that's fine. It's not like I say, inventory is not a big issue in the municipality. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Yanetsky?
On page 3.3, could you help me out and understand the write-ups and what they actually mean? I know you got them in brackets. Does that mean you got more inventory than?
Yes, than is in the system.
So how does that happen?
Sometimes it's a unit of measure issue. Sometimes it's something has come in and they haven't receipted it in properly. So the sign shop in particular, there actually wasn't any this year, but other times there have had, sign shop is a separate area compared to the stores, and sometimes they'll receive things indirectly there instead of going through the stores. Let's see, the ones that we've got on here for this year, steel, aluminum, plate, I think those ones were a unit of measure issue. It was meters squared and it wasn't measured properly, so.
Okay. I mean, is that sort of positive, I guess? You got more than you have allocated or calculated?
Yeah.
Actually, probably in the end, it's you probably paid for it in the end somewhere along the way. It's just that the paperwork just didn't follow up correctly. Is that more or less?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Schneider?
Yeah, this is probably more for Ms. Fletcher or Mr. Reedman, but when Councillor Gazzola was talking about the weighing of things like salt, I'm all for, accurate inventory control, but, if on a night like we might experience tonight with a lot of snow, I think the main concern is to get the salters out there. Is there a way maybe of coming up with an average load weight for a night of salting? And we know that, there were 8 truckloads, so much weight, just so it wouldn't be so onerous as you try to keep track of things.
Ms. Fletcher?
Through the chair, absolutely, if we had a major snow event and called everybody in, there's 2 things that we can do. It isn't onerous. We can just do a specific route that takes people across the scale, and or if it was getting backed up, we certainly could do an estimation or a count of the number of trucks going out. And then I think to Ms. Tasker's point, it's about making sure that things get into the system properly. So I know there was a question about the manholes. Sometimes what happens is folks are on call, they're doing emergency work after hours, and communication just doesn't go into the system properly, and that's what we're trying to clean up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I believe those are all the questions. If I can ask for, actually, no recommendation is required on this one. There isn't a recommendation required. So that looks like it is it. Thank you for a lot of awesome work again, Ms. Tasker. You do a lot of great work with a few staff resources, and so it's very much appreciated on behalf of council. And with that, motion to adjourn. Councillor Marsh, all those in favor, opposed, that's carried. We'll go into special council right away. And we have one item to consider in caucus, moved by Councillor Galloway Seelock, seconded by Councillor Ioannidis. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, everybody.